The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So we got a timeline on Alex Ovechkin, not the timeline that anybody really wanted to hear, but I guess it could have been worse. Broken leg, 4 to 6 weeks, hopefully early in the new year. He's back on the ice and resuming his chase of the all-time goals record. He's 27 away from catching Wayne Gretzky and going past Wayne Gretzky. Also, there's the issue of the not the football team, but the hockey team, which is playing really well. They lost last night without him. They're one of the best teams in the league so far this year with him. How much will this set them back as a team while he's out, not just the goal chase? We'll get into that a little bit. We had snow last night in Cleveland. That's going to be diminishing as the years go by in the NFL, as it's going to be probably mostly dome stadiums, including the one that will be built here. I don't think there's really any doubt about it, whether it's built in Maryland or D.C., that it will be a dome facility. You just can't dump billions of dollars, and it's now a multi-billion-dollar process to build a stadium. You just can't use it for 10 games a year. So they're going to be domes. And what we saw last night in the second half in Cleveland, that's good television. That's, I don't know how good football it is, but that's kind of fun to watch. And over the years, the NFL gets a bump when they play snow games. And that's why they have some of these cold weather games that they purposely put at night, hoping for snow. And at Arrowhead Stadium, where you've got an open air stadium and a team that's playing deep into January and into February every year, that's a possibility. Lambeau Field is never going to have a dome, but Cleveland's going to get a new stadium. And what we saw last night is not going to happen down the road, and it's probably going to happen less and less. I guess Buffalo's stadium is going to be built open air. That's already in the works, so I guess they won't have a dome there. But, as technology increases, maybe they can even put a dome over the field. So kind of fun, and it brought back memories of being a kid and playing football in the snow at North Chevy Chase Elementary School 50-some years ago. and I think everybody who grew up playing football in the snow had some nostalgia watching the game last night. We don't usually play a pregame interview after a game is over, right? Because there's no point. The game has been decided. But Jameis Winston not only shined on the field last night, leading the Browns to an upset over the Steelers, he shined in the pregame and he shined in the postgame. And I've been saying for a long time, these in-game and pregame interviews, they're generally insipid. There's no information there. The NFL is now insisting that coaches talk to reporters on the sideline. Maybe this has to do with the fact that they want more transparency, but I guess they feel like there's also entertainment and interest value in that. And so what usually is, kind of a run-of-the-mill, we hope to play our best, we're ready to play, yada, 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 turned into something a little bit more as Kaylee Hartung, who's part of the Prime telecast, talked to Jameis Winston, the Browns quarterback, before the game.
You have said you don't become a Brown until you beat the Steelers. What will it take tonight?
The horse is prepared for battle, but victory comes from the Lord. So I'm dependent on the Lord.
Is that the message to the team?
Day by day, one play at a time. That's the message.
Weather conditions tonight. We're expecting winds up to 15 miles per hour in a wintry mix. How will that impact your ability to throw the ball?
I am so happy and grateful that the Lord has blessed me to play in some snow, to be in true football weather in Cleveland, Ohio, at Huntington Bank Field today to give him the glory. It's a beautiful day.
Sure feels like you're playing in the AFC North.
It is. It's magical. Thank you.
Now, I'm not a big fan of athletes proselytizing. Is that the correct term for that? I didn't like it when Kurt Warner would do it after games. But in this particular case, it's fine. She says to him, and I guess it's a question you have to ask, but you ask the quarterback, how are the conditions, the weather conditions, going to affect your ability to throw the football? And what is he going to say? Oh, yeah, I played at Florida State. I grew up in warm weather. This is going to be a problem for me. I don't think I can get it done. He's going to say, yeah, I feel I can handle it. I play for the Cleveland Browns. I'm expected to play in these conditions, whatever. Instead, he took it in a direction it should have gone because the pregame is pretty much useless. Postgame, you find out some information, but in the postgame, after the Browns won the game 24-19, overcoming the snow conditions and getting the kind of game that they've been looking for out of Nick Chubb, who had 2 touchdowns last night, including the game winner inside of the last minute. He went this way, and this was. I mean, this is a guy I think is going to do well in television after the career is over, and maybe he's gearing up for that. But this was Winston after the game, getting it done in the snow, and how he did it.
It really was amazing. Like, I was just praying on the sideline because that fourth quarter, it really was like it was a whole paradigm shift. Like, we were playing so well offensively, and then bang, bang, back-to-back drives with turnovers. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, this is really an NFL's filmed moment. The snow starts pouring down. It starts getting like I felt like my feet started getting heavy because I'm squishing through the snow. And man, it was so good, and it was so great to end up getting that win.
That's great. That's great. Now, not everybody felt that way about the conditions. George Pickens of the Steelers, as if, playing for Pittsburgh, you're not going to play in bad weather, and especially in that division. And in late November, you could expect a possible game like this in Cleveland. And he said, sore loser, conditions played a huge, huge part in today's game. I really don't think the Cleveland Browns are a good team at all. I think the conditions kind of saved them today. Excuse me, they had to play in the same conditions you did. You're not a team from like Miami or Los Angeles. You're a Rust Belt team. You have to be ready to play in the snow just as the Browns have to be ready to play in the snow. Did have 4 catches on 7 targets, 48 yards, but also blamed the officials after the game. He took issue with a pass interference on cornerback Martin Emerson during a deep third down pass attempt from Justin Fields in the fourth quarter, gesturing to them after the play. Pickens fell as they ran down the sideline. The contact appeared to be minimal. They didn't throw a flag, and Pickens said, that's what I'm saying, the conditions and away game refs. He's going to get fined for that for sure. And it also appeared that he had like a confrontation with fans in the stands, had to be dragged away from it. Man, these are guys who play for a Hall of Fame coach. I don't think this is going to sit well. And they don't usually have these kind of issues there. Mike Tomlin runs a pretty tight ship, and to have this with George Pickens, sore loser after the game as the Steelers go down. And we're going to get into this a lot more coming up. The issue that's going on with the quarterback here, Jaden Daniels, who has been playing for the last 4 games, but with what's come out this week from Kliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn and kind of an evasive answer by Daniels, clearly he's been playing hurt for the last month. There's no question about that now. He was able to overcome it in his first game back, throwing the Hail Mary to beat Chicago, and then he played pretty well in the Giants game. But the last 2 weeks, not so great against the Steelers and not good at all against the Eagles. Those are 2 really good defenses, but that's an issue, and we'll get to what's being said about that as Kliff Kingsbury held a news conference yesterday and what Dan Quinn said about it the other day. In New York, it is over for Daniel Jones. I don't think that's breaking any news there. They are going to go with Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito, who excited the fan base last year when he started 6 games and went 3-3. And Jones has basically been bubble wrapped for the rest of the year since if he's hurt, they would owe him $23 million in an injury settlement next year. They can get out of it by cutting him at the end of the season, which they're going to do. And he is now 4th string. They said yesterday at practice, he was on the scout team safety team where he just stood there just to have a body on the field. And I've never heard this before. Like, I don't even know why there was a news conference because, the way they do it is the starting quarterback has a news conference every week. And if you're not the starting quarterback, you don't have one. And Daniel Jones, maybe at his request or whatever, but he chose to have a news conference yesterday and surprised, I think, most people by opening it this way.
All right, wrote something down just to make sure I say it the right way. The opportunity to play for the New York Giants was truly a dream come true, and I'm extremely grateful to the Mara and Tisch families for the chance to play here. The Giants are truly a first-class organization, and I have nothing but genuine respect and appreciation for the people who have built it and who helped carry on that tradition. I've met so many special people and created relationships that will truly last a lifetime. Thank you to all my teammates, coaches, and staff that have done so much for me these past 6 years. There have been some great times, but of course, we all wish there had been more of those. I take full responsibility for my part in not bringing more wins. No one wanted to win more games worse than me, and I gave everything I had on the field and in my preparation. Of course, this season has been disappointing for all, and of course, I wish I could have done more. I'm 100% accountable for my part. I did not play well enough consistently enough to help the team get the results. The reality of the NFL is it's hard to win games and requires consistent performance from everyone involved. We didn't do that well enough, so the idea to change something happens, and I understand. I love the game. I love being part of a team. I'm excited for the next opportunity and know that there's a lot of good football in front of me, and I'm excited about that. To all the fans, I have deep respect and appreciation for your passion and love for the Giants. The fans are a huge part of what makes playing for the Giants so special.
Yeah, well, the fans probably are saying good riddance to a quarterback who's led them to a 2-8 record this year. And what's curious about the decision to go with Tommy DeVito is it was presumed he was the third-string quarterback because they paid $5 million to Drew Lock to be the starter if Daniel Jones was hurt. I mean, they were thinking they were going to be a playoff team this year. Now, as they mishandled the Saquon Barkley situation and other things, and as the way things unfolded, and Jones, who had one good year 2 years ago, has now come back to where he probably is, and probably is on the exit ramp of a football career. But in going with DeVito, who's making less than $1 million a year, an undrafted free agent, and not going with Locke, who they brought in for this purpose to be the backup quarterback, it raises some questions here. And one of them is, are the Giants trying to tank? There's no question they're going to draft a quarterback, but are they trying to put themselves in the best draft position by playing the quarterback who's not as good as the one they paid $5 million to? Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network on yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show.
I truly don't think that that's what it is. I think that, listen, they had to do something. Okay, Daniel Jones, since the start of 2023, was 3-13 as the starting quarterback. We can talk about the injury guarantee and $23 million. All that's a function of sending him to the bench, right, and demoting him all the way to third, maybe fourth string, depending how they end up scoring things out this week. With Tim Boyle now joining the practice squad here. But the reality is they weren't good enough. Like, when they say it's a football decision, it was. They've stunk with Daniel Jones as their starting quarterback, and they've been trying to draw everything out of him here. But then they had to make a move. With Drew Lock, he has played some good football. I mean, he started off hot, way back his rookie year in Denver. He's had a few opportunities. He played well when he took over for Geno last year briefly with the Seahawks. But he hasn't had a lot of reps in the system. He got hurt early on in training camp. Maybe it was the preseason opener, and then missed a lot of reps. So he just hasn't had a lot of time on task in the system. Tommy DeVito, they signed him for a $10,000 bonus back in April of 2023.
Great story.
He's earned every opportunity that he's gotten. And when he got to play, they were 3-3 with him as the starting quarterback. I also really do believe, and again, these are football decisions, but who's going to buy you more time at MetLife Stadium before the fans get down your throats, Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito? With Tommy Cutlets in there, the building wants him to succeed for so many different reasons. They think, hey, we can win. This is our guy. He's from in our backyard, a good Italian boy from the neighborhood. He can get this thing done. Drew Lock's a really talented guy. If Drew Lock threw an incompletion on third down on the first series, he's getting booed. They're all getting booed. Tommy DeVito probably gets booed too, but probably he has a little bit more time here. It adds a different storyline. It adds a different juice. They're betting on all that, trying to find a spark. And they're another team that's just trying to stay semi-relevant, keep players engaged, because they do have a lot of young talent on that team.
Yeah, but I think it it basically closes the door on any possibility that Locke gets re-signed. Now, maybe they weren't thinking that anyway. Maybe they realize he's not going to be in their future even as a backup next year. It would seem like they want to take a look to see how good he is, but maybe not. And DeVito is very cheap to keep around as a third stringer next year since he was an undrafted free agent. So maybe that had something to do with it as well. They know there's no future with Drew Lock. There may be a slight chance of a future with DeVito. And what Pelissero is saying, well, if you're going to stink, you might as well have some fun while you're stinking. And Tommy Cutlets adds some juice and some spark to an otherwise dead team walking at 2-8. Commanders. And boy, you know, it's been a long time since we've been moving into Thanksgiving where this team is talking about urgency. Usually urgency has gone by the door sometime in September or October. So it's somewhat refreshing to hear this. And Terry McLaurin is among the best speakers on the team. Terry McLaurin yesterday at practice on the issue of urgency. I mean, isn't this kind of refreshing to hear that there's urgency with this football team after 2 losses? Here's Terry.
Each week is urgent, you know, and obviously when you lose 2 in a row, especially in 2 different ways, but I think, you know, the urgency is definitely there. It's always been there. It's never been lacking here, which I love that a lot. It's just, you know, we played 2 great teams that, you know, executed better than we did down the stretch, and, you know, Eagles did a great job in the trenches on the perimeter, and you got to give them credit. But for us, I think we give ourselves a better chance when we're staying on schedule offensively. Defensively, they continue to create chaos and give us opportunities to get the ball back for us and just play better complementary football, honestly. You know what I mean? I feel like last week defense really held in there, really strong, and for us not to be able to come through and put points on the board consistently, that's tough. And when you're going against a good team, eventually they're going to continue to make plays. So I know the urgency is there and the attention to detail is there. It's just about executing it when the time comes. So the great thing about it, we have a really good group that likes to hang our hat on the work that we're putting in, and we're excited to try to get back on track this week. Good thing about it, you know, it's another opponent, but it's in the division as well. So we have a chance to not only get one win on the win-loss column, but have a chance to get a win in the division, which is crucial if we want to have a chance to, you know, go where we want to go this season.
That's Terry McLaurin yesterday. So it's no longer a question, it seems, whether or not Jaden Daniels has been playing hurt. The question is, how hurt has he been while he's been playing? And we'll dive into that next with some comments from Kliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn and what was said the other day by Jaden about why he's being wrapped up every time he comes off the sidelines. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
It is my earliest memory, and if you are my age or older, you probably have at least some memory of John F. Kennedy being assassinated 61 years ago today, and I'll have some thoughts on that coming up at 10 o'clock. I believe at 66, I have to be at the lowest end of age of people who actually have some memory of that. 5 years old. I can remember it as if it were yesterday. What happened on this day in 1963, and we'll get to that. Much lighter stuff is what's going on with the Washington football team, and now what we're finding out really probably in the last few days about Jaden Daniels and his health. I mean, the people, trained eyes who've watched him play in the last month, like Ron Jaworski, and said he's not right. The curious thing about the injury is the 2 losses that he's had are in the last 2 weeks. The 2 wins come immediately after the injury. True, they weren't as good a teams as they played the last 2 weeks in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but he looked much sharper in those games. And I guess, you know, if you take away the Hail Mary against the Bears, we'd be looking at 3 out of 4, and the picture might be different. But let's go back to Monday. And after they had the extended time off after playing in Philadelphia on Thursday night, listen carefully as to how Dan Quinn phrased this question about Jaden Daniels when asked about it Monday.
Clearly and honestly, Jaden is not injured right now, but we did lose valuable practice time, John, with him and his teammates when he was injured.
Clearly and honestly, Okay, anybody who prefaces an answer like that, there's some gray area in there. And he also said he's not injured right now. So maybe he had the last part of it against Philadelphia, and with the extended time off, since they were off for the weekend, maybe now he is fully healthy. He didn't use the term 100%, but he said not injured. Now, in the NFL, there's code for this. You are expected to play when you're hurt. You are not expected to play when you're injured. And if he was, in fact, injured, then he probably shouldn't have been playing. And the question is about the last two, and you take each season individually, but clearly this season was all about developing Jaden Daniels, right? I mean, that was the number one goal, to see what you got there with the number 2 pick, and hopefully by the end of the year you're seeing enough promise that he can be your franchise guy for a long time, and I think we saw that promise very early on. I mean, he was phenomenal in the first part of the season. But here's the question. If, in fact, he was injured, because he said not injured now, if, in fact, he was injured, two things, really. Were you jeopardizing his health further by putting him out on the field compromised? And two, you got Marcus Mariota in here on a pretty big backup deal. I think it's $10 million. You brought him in to win games if Jaden couldn't play. Would you have had a better chance of winning the last 2 games with Marcus Mariota, or even the last 4 games with Marcus Mariota, than you did with an injured Jaden Daniels? I don't know. It's an interesting question. He also says in that soundbite there that it limited them in what they could do at practice. You know, what were the things that they couldn't do because of him being compromised? And he little things trickled out, like, you know, they did more walkthroughs than actual full speed practice and things like that. So yesterday, when offensive coordinator Kliff Kingsbury had his news conference, the question is obviously asked, well, with Jaden limited, what did that mean in terms of what you were able to do in practice?
I'm not going to divulge what we did while he was, I would say, more banged up, but hopefully we play better this week. I'll just say that.
See, so he's being very evasive about that. And then Jaden himself, when he held his news conference on Wednesday, they asked him why he puts that wrap around his body every time he comes off the field, and he said, "Oh, the weather's getting colder. I need to keep warm." No. We watched. Nobody saw Jameis Winston in the snow put a wrap around his ribs last night. No, the ribs. Now he could have been. I guess if he could have been more specific, or if somebody could have probed a little deeper, was it to keep the ribs that were hurt warm? That makes sense. But it's not just staying warm on the sidelines, because you never see that. You never see a quarterback, other than one who is nursing injured ribs, do that. So there's that. This is the first. This is not a controversy, but for an organization that has lived with it for decades, it's a little bit of a okay. But, you know, there's a lot of intrigue that goes on with the NFL, and you don't want to give up a lot of things that are going on. So I kind of understand it. The other part of this equation is, he said, 2 tough games, did not look good at all in the Philadelphia game, and the question of, you know, confidence, and you see that when quarterbacks start to struggle. I think we're seeing it with Caleb Williams right now, although he did a pretty good job of setting them up for what should have been the game-winning field goal on Sunday. But, you know, that's, like they say, the crisis of confidence. Kingsbury's obviously not worried about that.
He's pretty much who he is. I mean, he's competitive as all get out. And like I said, for him to put us in that position in the fourth quarter in both games to even have a chance to win, I thought was really impressive. And he's very tough and very competitive. And I know he earned a lot of respect from his teammates just by battling the last few weeks.
Okay, so there's that, and then now there's the question of the last 2 weeks. Did they do enough to overcome what has happened in the last 2 games? And now they're in, as they say, rebound time.
There's a lot of things. Played 2 really good defenses, first off, and then just having the ability to be on the practice field, continue to get reps together and build. I think this is the first week we've been able to do that consistently as a unit, put in a full week, and so hopefully that pays off. But, you know, still had a chance in the fourth quarter. Our guys battled even when we weren't playing our best, which I appreciated, but just nailing the details, calling better plays. I mean, overall, collectively as an offense, we can be better. And I think a week of real practice will help that.
Is there anything specific or different that you focus on with Jaden now that he's back to practicing for the first time, consistently in a month?
Yeah, I think you just get back to the basics, the fundamentals, and really hone in on those. I think anytime you have a couple games that, aren't to maybe the level we all want to be at, you narrow the focus, and it's like, hey, let's nail the footwork, let's nail the reads, progressions, the base stuff, and start there. And he's a guy who, when he is working at it, he works really hard. He's very focused, and so this week has been good to see him back out there going full speed and getting the reps that I think will help us play at a higher level.
Last thing from Kingsbury yesterday. Realize he's been fired from 2 head coaching jobs because of declining play at the end of the season. They when he was in Arizona with Kyler Murray, they got off like a house of fire. And at the end of the seasons, they would decline. They would tail off. And it's way too early to say after, back-to-back losses that that's happening now. But as he was wrapping up the news conference yesterday, the question came up.
I'm not saying this is happening this year, but historically your offenses have declined a little bit in the second half of seasons. Are you aware of that, and is it important for you to, break that trend?
I would have to see what you're talking about historically, like the references, but, yeah, I don't have any plans to do anything to break that trend that I know of. Yeah. I mean, I would have to see what years you're talking about. So I was thinking about doing triple option. Is that what you're thinking? I don't know. We're going to do what we do.
Yeah, and if you see the video, he does walk out. But that was the last question. He got angry and walked away. And then kind of a snarky little exit there with, we'll run the triple option. So it's getting under his skin a little bit, and nothing cures what's going on here like a win. And they are 10.5-point favorites for Dallas coming in on Sunday. All right, some college football, and I am really excited about this. My son is an Indiana graduate, and they are having a season that's beyond belief. I mean, nobody could have imagined this. Indiana football, a good year is if they scratch out 6 wins and they go to one of these dinky bowls. And I remember going with my son to the Pinstripe Bowl when they played Duke years ago. That was a really cool thing. Hey, this is the high mark of Indiana football, playing in a bowl like this. Well, they're almost certainly going to be in the playoff, even if they lose tomorrow against Ohio State. And this is unimaginable for a school that starts talking about basketball in the summertime. That's what Indiana is. Indiana is a basketball school. They got 5 national championships, and that's what they care about the most. But all of a sudden, football has gotten very, very intriguing. Joel Klatt, who will call tomorrow's game with Gus Johnson on Fox, on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show on the phenomenon of Indiana football.
When the schedule came out, Indiana was an afterthought, not just because of them changing a coach and the fact that they hadn't had any history of success, but when you looked at it, they faced both teams that played for a national championship last year, Washington and Michigan, and they had Ohio State. So this has been quite remarkable. But it's also, I think, part and parcel to what the transformation of college football has provided. Dan, there is upward mobility, and now there is an avenue for teams that have been in the middle or even the bottom of college football to compete. And to me, I think that is a great thing. What Indiana is doing and Colorado is doing and others, Arizona State is doing, is good for college football, and in particular playing games that have real meaningful implications towards the college football playoff.
Yeah, because it used to be back in the 70s and the 80s, you just stockpiled all your talent. You look back at, the U had all of those running backs just waiting for a chance. That would never happen today. You'd be like, you're getting there. Willis McGahee, he's starting. I'm gone. Yeah. And that's what I think college football has benefited, because the kids are saying, I can go where I can play right away. And maybe I don't want to stay there the whole time. I can go there, make a name for myself. I can be Jaden Daniels at ASU, and then I could go to LSU and get a big payday here. So I think that's why we have maybe not great teams, but I think we have some good, really good teams in college football.
Yeah, so I think if you're asking me, what's the biggest difference from 5 and 6 years ago, right? Kind of the height of the 4-team playoff. I would have said that the stockpiling was still going on then, because those teams had essentially a monopoly on the national championship. They could go into a living room. Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney and Urban Meyer and then Ryan Day could go into a living room, and then they could say, listen, if you want to compete for a national championship, you have to come to our place, because nobody else could really compete at that time. It was such a perpetual circle of the rich getting richer and the good teams getting the best players and then playing soft non-conference schedules and then going back to the playoff and then getting the benefit of the doubt. Those teams didn't even have to win their division to get included into the 4-team playoff. But now it's very different. So the top of college football, I believe, has come down a little bit because they can't stockpile like we're talking about. And then the middle of college football has risen. And so that just small shift has created the parity where now we're looking at this and 15 to 20 teams have a path to the college football playoff. And I think 8 teams actually have a legitimate shot to win the national championship. All of that is good because the fan bases are more engaged, more fan bases, more engaged at the top level.
Give me those 8 teams that can win the national title.
Yeah, I mean, I might be stretching it with 8 because, you know, someone might scoff at like a Penn State or Notre Dame, or maybe even Indiana, and we'll see this week on Saturday against Ohio State. But Oregon is clearly in that class. Ohio State is clearly in that class. And then you've got all of the SEC teams, because they've proven that any one of those teams can beat the other on any given day. They've all beaten each other. So Georgia and Texas and Alabama and Ole Miss and Tennessee and maybe even Texas A&M. You know, there is a number of teams. I think that the team that I have question marks about that I know can play incredible offensive football is Miami. I'm just interested to see, like, what could they do in a shootout? Now, do I think that they would win 4 games or even 3 games in a playoff? Probably not, because of the defense and the issues that they have on defense. But boy, would I love to see Cam Ward go out there and sling it against some of the top defenses in the country.
Yeah, but losing to Georgia Tech was not a good look for them. And Mario Cristobal, he's nuts. I mean, he blew a game last year against Georgia Tech where he could have taken a knee, and almost Joe Pisarcik style, they fumbled and lost the game. So I don't see Miami in the mix. Part 2 from Klatt. And we've heard a lot of Deion Sanders speculation in the last few weeks because Michael Irvin is pushing for him to become coach of the Cowboys. And Deion made a statement the other day, now I've put my kickstand down here in Colorado. Well, as an avid biker, I know that you can kick the kickstand up very quickly and move on. I don't know if that was the greatest thing to say about staying at Colorado, but I'm going to play this from Klatt because Klatt knows stuff. Klatt is Colorado football royalty. He was a starting quarterback there. He's obviously very visible as the top analyst for Fox. They've done several of his games, and I didn't realize until I listened to this yesterday, he's actually got a relationship with Deion and played a role in Deion coming to Colorado. So it's interesting to hear his insight on whether or not Deion would stay at Colorado or go with what Michael Irvin is saying and take the opportunity to go back to the Dallas Cowboys and be the coach.
I mean, I was out front trying to get Deion at Colorado. So if Michael loves the Cowboys, like, I don't blame him, right? He's doing what he should do if he loves that organization.
Do you believe Deion when he says, hey, my kickstand's down, I'm staying here, I love it here. They got good recruits coming in because they're going to have to replace a couple of, top 5 talents. But do you believe that if the Cowboy opportunity were there?
No, I don't know. I know what he's told me. He's never lied to me. I talked to him through the process of getting hired at Colorado. I was involved to some degree, and every conversation I've ever had with him has been incredibly authentic and honest. That's all I can go by. I asked him last Friday, do you want to go to the NFL? And he looked at me and he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, because I don't feel like I would be fulfilling my calling and my purpose if I was there. And I asked him to expand on that. And he said, listen, my calling is to impact young men and be a mentor to young men. I happen to do that through coaching. And I feel like I can do that better at the college level than I could with a bunch of professionals that might listen to me and might not listen to me because of the amount of money that they're actually being paid. Now, like, take from that what you will. If Dallas makes him a great offer and his son is there, like, could he go? Yeah, of course he could go. Do I think that he desperately wants to? I don't think that that's the case. So if the opportunity arises, Dan, could he coach the Cowboys? Yes, and I think he would probably be really successful at it. I also know that he loves being at Colorado, and I won't be surprised at all if he stays there.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the end-all for him. I understand that. I understand what he's saying. He can be full Deion in college.
That's right.
Probably can't be full Deion in the NFL.
Well, and think about it too. Like in college, and this is gonna forgive the language here, but or the description. You can be kind of a mini dictator as a head coach. Like, you are the top of the totem pole in college as the head coach. You're not in the NFL. You know, you're third at best in terms of personnel and ownership and everything like that. And part of what's unique about Colorado, and I know this because of my involvement, is that Colorado kind of said, like, hey man, here are the keys. You can do whatever you want with the uniforms, with the traditions. Like this is your vehicle. So as much as Colorado was desperate for a guy like Deion Sanders and Deion specifically, you know, Deion needs a place like Colorado to be authentically himself, you know, and so I think that what you're saying there's a lot of truth to that.
What do you think Florida State is thinking when they see the success that Deion is having?
I can't imagine. I really can't, because I know he was at least talked about when they were hiring Mike. And so to see this, listen, he was up and a finalist for the TCU job. And so, like, he has been in conversations with other programs, and Colorado was the first one to pull the trigger. What Florida State is dealing with right now is something that everyone's going to have to look at, even Deion, by the way, that if you're going to play in the portal, then there's a chance that the bottom can fall out. And we're seeing that with Florida State. They had a great year, and then the bottom falls out. They cannot move on. Like, I think it's 62 is the number, $1 million that they would have to spend to move on. That's, you know, they're talking about trying to get out of their media rights deal. Like, they can't do that, Dan. And what are they thinking? I think that they're probably viewing that as a missed opportunity.
Deion would probably like to be asked if he wants to coach Florida State and be able to say, no, you guys had your opportunity.
Yeah.
Knowing Deion, it'd be like, hey, you had your chance. I tried to tell you. No, now I'm staying here.
He's 100% right. I agree 100% with Dan. The other thing that was said there by Klatt about the bottom dropping out when you rely on the portal, as we saw this year with Florida State, could happen to Deion too. You know, his star quarterback son is leaving, and Travis Hunter, who I think should win the Heisman Trophy and is probably the best player in college football and does so much for that team playing both ways, they're leaving. Can Deion replace that and also have, you know, the same feelings as his other son too? Shiloh, the defensive back, he's going to leave as well. So, you know, what's left? And that's why I think he could go someplace else. Now, the Florida State thing, what you just heard Klatt say about the buyout, $62 million. They're not Texas A&M. They don't have those kind of boosters and that kind of money. So I don't think they're going to be able to come up with that kind of money for a buyout. They'll probably roll another year with Mike Norvell. But one thing about Deion is smart, and Deion looks at the landscape, and he understands what is not only happening now, but what is going to happen down the line. And I think if he feels like the bottom could drop out. Now, he just got a commitment, I guess, from the top quarterback coming out of high school this year as he flipped from – maybe he's going to go to Florida State or some other school. He's going to go – he's a Colorado kid. He's going to go there. So maybe that's his replacement for his son. But, you know, one thing about Deion, he's really savvy. And if he thinks the bottom could drop out at Colorado just as it has this year at Florida State, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone. All right. Coming up in the next hour, we will take a look further at the game coming up for the Commanders plus the Ravens game on Monday night against the Los Angeles Chargers, and also a little more college football as it's a big weekend coming up. 2 undefeated teams that nobody would have expected in late November. Indiana and Army, both undefeated. Incredible. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, we'll get the view from the defensive coordinator, Joe Whitt, as the Commanders head into Sunday's game against Dallas. What is that? Familiarity breeds contempt? Doesn't sound like a lot of contempt with all the connections to Dallas between Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt. Both of them came here directly from Dallas. And what Joe Whitt says about familiarity, while you might think it's an advantage, he says it's not, and he'll explain that coming up. We also got Ravens preview. Ravens have the Monday night game at Los Angeles against the Chargers, and it's round 3 of the Harbaugh Bowl as John has won the first 2, most importantly, winning the Super Bowl more than a few years ago. Wow, that was 2013, so it was quite a while ago, almost 12 years ago that he beat him, and then Jim went off and won a national championship at Michigan, and now he's back in the NFL with the Chargers. Before we launch into the college football and the pro football, Isaac Kuhn Harris is with us today. I don't know if you want to reveal how old your parents are, but roughly, are they over 65 or no?
Just my dad.
Okay.
My dad.
Does he have you ever talked to him about the Kennedy assassination? Does he have any recollection of that?
I have, but I mostly talked to his older sister who's around your age about it.
And okay, I'm 66, so I think I'm at the lowest end of age that can have any memory of this. I was 5 years old. How old's your aunt? Same thing?
She was actually in high school.
So, okay, she's older, significantly older, and her memories would be different. Yep. What did she tell you about it?
She left school early.
Yeah.
They released school early for her, and she came home. They suggested everyone go home and kind of stay together because there was a panic, and she stayed with her mom listening to the radio. My dad was there just listening there, but he was around your age, like 5, just kind of listening on the updates and just curious about what happened, what was going on in Dallas.
Yeah, I've told my experience over the years, and if you've heard it, bear with me. If you haven't, I was, like, as I say, 5 years old, and my mother was driving me and my younger brother. He's 14 months younger than I am. In the car, we were going someplace, and she had the radio on, and it stayed on for a while, and then all of a sudden, she pulled over to the side of the road and began to cry because at first she thought she was listening to a recreation of the Lincoln assassination. And then when she realized what had happened, she obviously got very upset. I mean, you have to realize, where we were in this country at that time. We hadn't had those kind of things happen, not since like the 1800s. And we were coming off a period of great prosperity and great serenity, the Eisenhower years, and then the Kennedys. That was Camelot, and kind of like our family, young kids. Caroline is like a year or 2 older than I am, and John was a couple years younger, and people looked at them as the great society. No, that was Johnson was the Great Society. I forget how they termed it, but people said Camelot, like this beautiful family, beautiful wife, handsome husband, Kennedys, and this was America. And then to find out he was assassinated, it was unthinkable. And so everything went, kind of nuts. We were living in Bethesda at the time. She took us home, and my father, who usually would come home for dinner, he was working downtown, didn't get home till about 8 o'clock and didn't call because he couldn't call. The phone lines were shut down, tied up, certainly in the Washington area. And it was my first real memory of anything. Everybody else, some were in school, like your aunt, she was in high school. But it is, to this day, even when like, for example, about, 7 or 8 years ago, the Nationals, who have the racing presidents, added John F. Kennedy to the presidents. And for people younger than me, and maybe even some my age, but certainly younger, okay, yeah, he was a president. But to me, it's still kind of raw, and it was like a little bit haunting to see a racing president as John Kennedy. I don't have any recollection certainly of George Washington or Jefferson or Teddy Roosevelt or any of that, but that was something that stays with me to this day. And as we celebrate, as we look back on the anniversary every year, which is now we're up to 61, and so many of the people who were directly affected by it as adults are now gone, and someone my age, just the dwindling people that can remember what happened on that day. And it's just, and then I guess we've become, I don't want to say jaded, but things that have happened subsequently, 1968, only 5 years later, where it was just, crazy, where Martin Luther King is assassinated, and then a very short time later, Bobby Kennedy is assassinated. And when things like this happen in the world now, we don't have the same raw reaction that we had in 1963. And some of it, I guess, for me, is that's my first memory and the first real tragic memory that I'd never seen my mother cry before. All four of my grandparents were alive. There was nobody in the family that we grieved over at that point. And this was, for many people, like family. And this beautiful young family just torn apart by this, and the country torn apart by what was happening. And a lot of people will look at this as the beginning of the 1960s. Even though we were deep into 1963, there was still that happy, prosperous 1950s feel. And then we launched further into the Vietnam War. There were protests, the King assassination, the Kennedy assassination, and for many of us, it all started on this day in 1963, and it's certainly a memory that I'll never forget. All right, something much lighter: college football this weekend, and something we would never have thought of, that we're going into the weekend before Thanksgiving, and we have two undefeated teams playing tomorrow. One of them is Indiana, a basketball school, and the other is Army. Army, which doesn't have NIL money, as far as I know, doesn't have the transfer portal, and somehow, some way is undefeated and playing Notre Dame in what is actually a home game for them, but they're not playing at West Point. They're playing it at Yankee Stadium. So Notre Dame will be there tomorrow night. And, of course, Indiana, which is a basketball school, which has been nowhere on the landscape of college football forever, 10-0, playing in the big noon kickoff at Ohio State. Tony and Mike picking that apart yesterday on PTI.
The big games this weekend involve undefeated teams. Number 5, Indiana at 10-0, playing at number 2, Ohio State, and number 19, Army at 9-0, playing number 6, Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium. Wilbon, you love college football and you hate Notre Dame.
Yeah.
What would be the bigger deal, Indiana beating Ohio State or Army beating Notre Dame?
Well, Tone, historically, we know it would be Army beating Notre Dame. I mean, they've lost, what is it, like 15 straight to Notre Dame dating back to 1958 or something like that. I mean, that would be, and in Yankee Stadium, and I've followed college football, yes, all my life, and Notre Dame all my life, which is now more than 60 years. And so, yes, historically, that is a giant upset result, whatever you want to call it, in whatever category you want to put it. However, given this year, with the first year of this 12-team playoff, and you got so many people doubting Indiana, because Indiana hasn't really beaten anybody, and I've seen Indiana in person this year, and Ohio State needs to win this game. Ohio State better win this game, or they got no shot at getting in the playoff. Indiana never having won 10 games before in a season, having done it now. And so I'm a Big Ten kid through and through. I'm going to shove Notre Dame to the side, even though I'll be rooting for Army like crazy. And I want to see Indiana, Ohio State. That's the only game for me this weekend, Tone.
Did you actually say that your life is now more than 60 years? It's way more than 60 years. Stop.
That's
okay,
nice.
Let's go back to that. I disagree with you very quickly. I will disagree. I don't think Ohio State will be out of the playoffs even if they lose to Indiana, not if they lose to an unbeaten team ranked in the top 5 at that point. So I disagree. I think it's a really good question, which is the bigger deal. I think from the college football playoff standpoint, the bigger deal is Army beating Notre Dame, because at that point, Notre Dame would have a loss at home to Northern Illinois, and then a loss at its second home, New York City, to Army, and they would be out of the college playoffs. They would be out. But in the real world where we live, Indiana beating Ohio State at Ohio State, are you kidding me? That would be the biggest win in the history of Indiana.
Yes,
Army's had bigger wins. Army's been number one. It's a long time ago, but you could look it up. It existed. This would be unbelievable
Indiana,
for Indiana.
Yes,
absolutely.
Never.
And I will tell you that I don't see Army winning, because Navy was undefeated at a neutral site, and Notre Dame pounded them 51-14. I think Indiana's got a better chance, so I'd be stunned.
Well,
I'd be stunned if they won.
Well, I would say this. Navy has beaten Notre Dame, I think, a couple of times. Now, once with Charlie Weiss as the head coach there. So, you take that. He was a complete fraud at Notre Dame. But, yeah, I mean, Tony's right about Army. They Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside. Doc Blanchard, Glenn Davis, back in the war years, 1945-46, they were back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners. Yeah, they were the number one team in the country. Indiana's been nowhere in the landscape. They made the Rose Bowl in 1967. That's unbelievable that has happened this year. So I agree. Indiana winning at Ohio State would be a bigger deal tomorrow. Back to the Commanders. Joe Whitt talks once a week, though he hasn't talked in a couple of weeks because they had a Thursday game last week against Philadelphia. But he's looking back on what has been somewhat disappointing for his team. They had played better defensively. They were carried by the offense in the early part of the season. Then the defense started to do his thing. And this was his kind of wrap-up, the way he opened up his news conference yesterday, looking back on the loss to Philly last week.
It's disappointing that we played defensively well for 53 minutes, but it's a 60-minute game. And so we talk about finishing winning moments, and we didn't get that done, and it's disappointing. I know people want to say that we got tired. Well, that's why we roll with a deep crew. I don't believe in excuses. We're here to win, and we got to win, okay? All right, and so I thought the men did play hard, though, and they executed the plan the way that we wanted to go. They ran and hit, and for 53 minutes, it looked the way that it's supposed to look. And now I got to do a better job of getting us to play 60 minutes of football, okay? And hopefully with this next opportunity that we have with Dallas, we'll get that done. Talking about Dallas a little bit, had the history there, being there the last couple of years. Have a lot of respect for the men in that room, coaches, players, ownership, front office, everybody. It was a good place to be, okay? And then I know how hard those players in that locker room work and how they prepare and how they get ready. So this is going to be a very, very hard game. A lot of respect for Cooper Rush. We won a number of games with him as our quarterback when we were there. So I know he can play winning football. And so this is a game it's a divisional game, all right? It's the next game. That's why it's a big game. It's not a big game because of any other reason than that. It's the next game. But we got to do our job, all right? And that's play 60 minutes of hard-nosed football and get back to get to turning this ball over, and so we can get back in the win category.
Well, they have not done a good job of turning over other teams, but they have done a good job of hanging on to the football. That they have turned it over very few times. I think Jaden Daniels has 3 picks this year, and they had a fumble. So that's pretty remarkable that they've gone through all these games without turning it over themselves. This was, I think, the most interesting part of yesterday's news conference with Joe Whitt, and he was asked about the familiarity. Now, he's got a long history with Mike McCarthy. They worked together in Green Bay, and then they move on to Dallas together for the last 3 years, and now he's here with Dan Quinn. And the question was, is it tougher or easier when you're familiar with the opponent?
Probably more challenging because, I was with Mike for a long time, 11 years in Green Bay, 3 years there. We've had a lot of conversations. We do this thing called Cross the Hall there, where the defensive coaches go work with the offensive players, and so I've gone back and looked at all my Cross the Hall meetings. What have I told them that's difficult, and same thing with Kellen. He, the big play, he sort of hit us on something that I said in one of those Cross the Hall meetings was difficult, but I knew it. We already knew that was going to come, but he hit it, and so that's part of it. When you're at an organization and you're trying to win, you're not trying to hold anything back. But when coaches start going to other places, information goes with it. So that's part of the NFL football.
Yeah, and when players change teams during a season, they sometimes bring their information with them. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. But what he's saying is because they know what they're going to do, it's tougher than them knowing what they're going to do, if you get that. Last thing is about the defense, and as well as it is picked up in recent weeks, there is one lingering problem, which Whitt discussed yesterday.
December, January football, February hopefully, we got to stop the run. Like that's the number one thing that we have to do. Not shying away from it. That's we looked at the process over these last couple of days of, all right, how can we be better with it? What do we need to do from a coaching standpoint, player standpoint, from a practice, how we're implementing, the techniques, just back to the basics, because you can't give up I think we're at 150 yards a game. You can't do that and think that you're going to win in December football. That's just not how it happens. So we have to shore that up, and then we have to start producing the ball. All right. I think we're covering the pass really well, but we're not producing the ball. And so I don't care if it's fumbles, interceptions, what have you. We need to produce the ball.
Yeah, 150 yards a game. This is a get-right game because Dallas can't run the ball. They had a chance to get Derrick Henry, didn't do it, brought back an over-the-hill Ezekiel Elliott, and they are not good at running the football, so that should be a kind of a get-right game on Sunday. Last thing from the locker room yesterday, Nick Allegretti, who I think is one of the sharpest guys. Offensive linemen are usually really, really sharp guys, and he's one of them. Played in Kansas City, won Super Bowls there, and was asked about the third down problems that they've had the last 2 weeks. If you're not aware of this, against Pittsburgh, they were 5 of 14 on third down. Even worse in Philadelphia, 3 for 12. That's 8 for 26 over the last 2 weeks. This is Allegretti on that.
I try not to. I'm aware of the numbers from the past couple weeks, but try not to think about it too much. It's something you really want to try to be good on first, second down. That's the case every week, especially in this league. It's a pass rushing league. So you want to try to stay out of third downs, and when you're in third downs, you just got to do whatever you can to convert. So obviously want to see better numbers, and hope to have that be the case this week.
Looks like a clean sheet on the injury report for the offensive line. How important is that? How are you feeling? How cohesive does the unit seem?
Yeah, that's big because obviously we were, first 11 weeks going straight. A couple short weeks in there. Was nice to have a couple days off this past weekend. Body feels good. I know I'm not going to speak for the other linemen, but I think they all feel pretty good as well. So definitely was nice having a few extra days this week.
Okay, so healthy offensive line, anxious to do better on third downs than they have the last 2 weeks, and I think they get it done against the team they're 10.5-point favorites against. Nikki Javala has a story in the Post today, which should not be surprising off the incredible turnaround that they've had this year, even though they've lost a couple of games. If you've been to games recently, I was at the Chicago game. Very little blue, I thought, mostly burgundy there. I'm told it was a little bit different against Pittsburgh, but they travel well. But tickets, which used to be so available, this is how bad things got, that people would show up with standing room only tickets. This is going back probably last 15 years, maybe less than that. Standing room only tickets that they bought, like on StubHub for like $2. And they'd show up, and when they got in the building, somebody would hand them a club seat voucher just so they could make it look a little bit better rather than that big swath of yellow that goes up on TV where nobody's there. Well, incredibly, and this has got to be, driving Dan Snyder crazy, which you would hope, even though he's sitting on a big pile of money. They're going to raise ticket prices next year. There's such interest that it's going to go up about 11%. For next year. That's the biggest jump in more than 10 years. They have informed season ticket holders of the increase today with the deadline of January 10th to renew. Wow. So they're putting the heat on. You got like 6 weeks, 7 weeks to renew, or the opt-out deadline. The auto-renew goes into December 22nd, I guess, if we don't do anything about it. More than half of the season ticket holders will have an increase of 13% or less. 30% of the accounts will incur an increase of 5% or less. That's probably the way upper deck seats. More than 10,000 seats, roughly a third of the season tickets up for renewal, will increase by up to 8%. And, as far as buying season tickets, there was a time when it was kind of quaint that you would, renew your tickets every year, and the people around you back in the RFK days would renew theirs, and it was kind of like a neighborhood every game. Well, now with StubHub and SeatGeek and things like that, people sell their tickets. There are a lot of people that don't buy season tickets because they only want to go to a game or two and are willing to pay slightly inflated prices to go to that game rather than to go to games that they don't want to. And I guess this was inevitable that they would raise the prices, but that's a pretty significant jump. In 2021, this is only, what, 4 years ago? 3 years ago? Team announced it had lowered the cost of 11,000 tickets and added perks to some season ticket packages. This is when Jason Wright was saying that they couldn't give them away. And there was that time. But obviously, things have changed with this team, and ticket prices are going up. I've talked about the baseball situation last couple of days with the Rays. They're going to be playing at George Steinbrenner Field, which is the spring training home of the Yankees, seats 10,000. And you know about the A's, they're going to play the next 3 years in Sacramento, at least 3 years, because they have yet to break ground for the new ballpark in Las Vegas. And we know from the experience here that it takes 3 years. Rob Manfred is trying to say, everything's on track. They'll be okay to open up the 2028 season, no problem. Well, there's another problem that's brewing with the Rays, who may be at George Steinbrenner Field for more than a year, because the roof that was torn off at Tropicana Field in the hurricane in October is going to cost, I think it's like $50 million. The team was going to pick up part of it, and then the city council had approved $23 million to repair the roof. That now has been reversed, as the city council last night deliberated on this, and they voted 4-3 not to loan the team that money. The construction was set to be overseen by Hennessy Construction, a St. Petersburg-based contractor, but the reversal set in after the council voted to delay consideration of revenue bonds for the new ballpark, which is supposed to cost $1.3 billion, and, by the way, is only going to seat about 30,000 people. So even with the new ballpark, they're only going to be up to 30,000. The Rays were hoping that they could play at Tropicana Field for the 2026 season, but that may not happen. So they're at George Steinbrenner Field, and not only does it just seat 10,000 people, but if you've ever been in that part of the country, you can't play during the day. It's too brutally hot and humid, and you're going to play at night, and you're going to have thunderstorms all the time. And it only seats 10,000 people. This is unraveling in terms of people being at the games because of what happens with stadiums. Like owners, decide to hold up a city and have them build a stadium for you. And, is it possible that the ballpark doesn't happen? I think eventually it might, or is delayed more than a few years. Do you want a sport that has 30 teams, 30 major league teams, and 2 of them are playing in minor league parks? And at least with the Rays, they're staying in Tampa. The freaking A's are going to Sacramento. This is just a bad look for a sport that is dependent on television, as all professional sports are now. I mean, that's where the real money comes from. All the money that comes in from seat revenue and other things is insignificant. But that's a terrible, terrible look that two American League teams are going to be playing in, rinky-dink ballparks. They're a minor league stadium in Sacramento and a spring training home for an entire season, maybe longer now with this news. Crazy. And then this. The NFL has issued a security alert to teams and to players following the burglaries that happened with the homes of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Memo obtained by the Associated Press, the league says homes of professional athletes across multiple sports have become increasingly targeted for burglaries by organized and skilled groups. Yeah, well, they know when they're not home. And the tragedy of Sean Taylor happened largely because the then Redskins were playing on the road in Tampa, and they assumed that Sean Taylor, the burglars, assumed that Sean Taylor would be with the team in Tampa. He was injured. He was in his home in Miami. They broke into his home, and he came out of his room when he heard the noise with a sword. They got scared, shot him in the leg, and he died. And, the schedule has a lot to do with this. So this is a very scary thing that's happening now, and our players going to have to hire private security to be around their homes when they're not there. On top of that, sometimes their families don't travel to the games. So just beyond the burglaries, there's the safety issue of people breaking in your house when your family's at home. It's a bad situation. And if you watch the quarterback series on Netflix, there was a lot of shots inside the house of Patrick Mahomes. People got to look at what's in there, and that's got to frighten the league in a big way because, burglars know exactly when they're not going to be there, and it's easy to target that. That's a growing problem. All right, coming up, we got Ravens preview. We will talk to one of the reporters who covers them for WNST, Luke Jones, as we take a look at what is a pivotal game for them because they're coming off a very disappointing loss to the Steelers and a season that still has them on track for the playoffs, but a loss to drop them to 7-5. That might be something to be concerned about. We'll get to that more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.